Welcome to FourthBrain's deep dive of Beyond Jupyter Notebooks, MLOps environment setup, and first deployment. This video will be on the Apple macOS operating system with the M1 chip. Enjoy. This video is meant to be a deeper dive into everything that we saw during that event, but showing you the long, more painful way that it actually takes to get things set up, allowing things time to download, and really just making sure that we look at all the details that we really weren't able to cover in such a short event. So this is on an Apple macOS M1 chip computer, and this is essentially how you get your MLOps dev environment set up and how to do your first deployment. So let's jump right in. This is the presentation that we saw during the event, and what we're going to do is we're going to jump directly into the GitHub repo that we were using to get our MLOps dev environment set up. So this again is that repo that we use for our cohorts. What we see at the beginning is just a quick review of some command line basics. The key command line basics that we need to understand to get our M1 set up are cd, change directory, and also mkdir, or make directory. Also remember that sudo means super user, and it allows regular users, like I'm a regular user on this computer, to run programs that require access further down in the operating system. So it sort of gets behind the scenes and gets those security privileges that we need to install things that we need to make sure are installed to be able to do MLOps development. Okay, so the tools that we'll be using primarily in this setup piece of this are Git, Conda, and pip. We're also going to be leveraging VS Code. We're also going to be leveraging FastAPI as well as Docker. And for Mac, in addition to pip, we'll be leveraging Brew. Git is simply a version control system that allows us to make sure that we're doing things so that we can roll back any changes and that we're doing things that make it easier for distributed teams to work together. Conda and pip taken together can be viewed as simply a package installer. So pip is more of a package installer and package manager. So pip really helps you manage those packages, but Conda also helps you manage the packages that are core to data science and machine learning. Packages like NumPy, packages that are very common for us data scientists, machine learning engineers, and MLOps practitioners to be able to leverage. In addition, what Conda allows us to do is, rather than set up our own virtual environments, separate from the package management that is sort of built into Conda, it allows us to set up virtual environments that already have those packages that we're likely to need to leverage. So that's what's really nice about Conda, and that's why we encourage everybody to go ahead and pick up Conda as a tool. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that as we're getting started, we know we're going to need Git, we're going to need Conda, we're going to need pip. So we can go ahead and get started, and we are of course on Mac OS. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the terminal by using this hotkey of command plus space. We're just going to type in terminal here, and we'll see terminal pop up. And you can see the terminal is fresh here, and there's no Conda that is installed yet. And the way that I know that is because there's no word in parentheses that comes before Greg at FourthBrain. So we just want to make sure first that we install Homebrew. And what Homebrew is it's a way that we can download tools and packages just like pip. But Homebrew is a Mac-specific tool, and so a lot of things you can do with pip or Homebrew, but some things you can only do with one or the other. And if we go ahead and try to install Homebrew, it'll ask us for super user access, and we need to type in our password. This is the password that we use to log into our computer. Go ahead and press enter here, and then Homebrew will install. So once Homebrew has installed, I've already installed Homebrew on here, so it may take a little bit longer for you. Then we want to go ahead and make sure that we update Homebrew. And this guide was written initially for the Mac Intel chip. So the easiest way to update Homebrew is actually just brew update, and then you'll get this already up to date. All right. The next piece of this, again, this was for the Intel chip, and this says install the wget command. And if we scroll down a little bit, what we'll notice is that when we install the wget command, that's basically so we can go get Conda and Anaconda from a remote repo. However, if you watched our initial event, then you may have seen that for the M1 chip, it's actually better right now to use Miniconda. So I'm going to go ahead and find the appropriate Miniconda package, sort of the manual way here, not from the command line, but through my browser. I'm going to go to macOS installer. I'm going to go to this Miniconda 3 macOS Apple M1 ARM 64-bit package. I'm going to let it go ahead and sit there and download. Now I just need to click through and do the install. It's going to ask for that same password. And this is where the boring parts begin, that generally we don't have time for in events like the deep learning event. So Miniconda is going to install, and we can kind of see what's next here. We can even double time some of this. So for example, installer would like access. That sounds good. We can make sure that we have Git ready to go, and Miniconda is all set. So we can go ahead and move that to the trash. But before we make sure that we have Git ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and close the terminal and open it back up. And we can use our same little tag here, and you'll notice that we now have this base environment out in front of Greg at FourthBrain. Now what this means is that our install of Miniconda was successful. And this means now that we're not simply anywhere at the base of the terminal, but rather we're inside of our base Conda environment within the terminal. Now this is really nice because this is where we're going to work. Now you can work from here, but it's even a better idea, and if you scroll back up here, it's even a better idea to go ahead and create an environment that you want to work within primarily for what you're going to be developing. You can install things like Git in the base. There's no issue with that kind of thing. But it's even better to go ahead and just keep things real clean and just don't even mess with the base, but rather just use the environments that you need to use to do the things you want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a conda create, and I'm going to put this name tag so I can name the environment, and I'm going to name it MLOps dev. And what this is going to do is it's going to create my environment, proceed. I'm going to go ahead and do yes. So now you'll see I'm still in the base environment. I'm going to increase font size on this a bit. But what I can do here, as you scroll down, I can run a conda activate, and I'll just activate my MLOps dev. So now you see I'm in MLOps dev, and really what I can do here is I can make sure that I'm installing packages to MLOps dev. Okay, so back to Git. I can go ahead and brew again is going to just allow me to install a package. So I can install Git within MLOps dev. So that's what I'm doing right now. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and look at the VS Code download. And the VS Code download that I need is going to be the Mac on Apple Silicon. That's the M1 chip. So I can go ahead and install this at the same time. And this is, this is the fun stuff. Sort of waiting around. And then once it's done, you feel like you're not really working anymore. But since this one's almost done, I'll go ahead and get this started since this is the next step for us. And I'm just going to double click on Visual Studio Code, open, and boom, here I am in VS Code. Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to make sure that I'm still using the terminal, but I'm actually going to take VS Code and I'm going to put the terminal inside of VS Code. So how do I do that? Well, when I click on VS Code, you'll see in the top bar here, there's a button called Terminal. You can click New Terminal, or alternatively, you can go to View Terminal. And you'll see here that I have the same setup. Under the hood, it's not precisely exactly the same, but for all intents and purposes, for our development, it is the same. And I want to go ahead and do the same thing that I just did, which is to conda activate MLOps dev. So here we are. We're now in the terminal within VS Code. So we're kind of feeling like we're on the path here. Now, anytime I need to use the terminal, I can just jump to VS Code. Anytime I'm using the terminal for MLOps development. Okay, so we can X out of these. We can make sure that we are going back to our software development for MLOps. And what are we trying to do next? Well, the next piece is to go ahead and install the IntelliCode extension. So the extensions tab is here. Now you'll notice that it looks like I have the Jupyter extension and the Docker extension already installed here. Looks like I didn't quite fully uninstall those. You will not see those at this point, but we'll show exactly how we can get to see those. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and type IntelliCode here. So we see we've got the IntelliCode extension. Looks like we're already good to go. You're going to need to install that. We want to install the Jupyter Notebook extension. So we can type Python here. And what we'll see, Python Jupyter. And the Jupyter Notebook extension, reload required. So let's go ahead and reload that. And now we're good to go. So we've got IntelliCode, we've got Jupyter, and then we want to set the Python interpreter. So you can open up a new file here, or alternatively what you can do is you can simply do this Shift Command P, and since I've recently used this, it'll pop right to it, but you can start typing and yours will pop right to Select Interpreter as well. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and choose the environment that we just created. So that's my MLOps dev environment. So you'll see yours will probably pop up as recommended, but mine is actually not doing that in this case. No worries. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and select this one. And you'll see that VS Code is very smart. So VS Code is actually installing Python into my environment. And because that was the sort of warning triangle that I saw in there. All right. So we can now test this out as we did in the demo. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we have the key packages we need to run Jupyter Notebooks within our environment. So this is where I'm going to go back up here, and you'll notice that as we're setting up our environment, the step that I actually skipped was this pip install numpy pandas matplotlib Jupyter. And this is just to make sure that we have the packages that we need inside our dev environment. So once we have these packages, which will take a minute, in our new Python 3.10, then we're able to go ahead and create a new Jupyter Notebook file. And let's just do a simple test. X equals 5, Y equals 10. Let's see if we can print X times Y. And there we are. The next step is to get GitHub all set up. So if you don't have an account, go ahead and create an account on GitHub. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our secure shell. So if you remember from the event, the shell, that's simply another word for our command line. A shell is just a computer program. It could be command line. It could be a graphical user interface that exposes operating system services. So this is what we need access to. And a lot of programs, especially cloud computing services, they really don't allow you to connect directly to VS Code or to GitHub or to any sort of remote development tools without a secure shell. And this is very important. So we need to get our private, public, secure shell key pair set up. And the way to do this is simply to copy and paste this into your terminal. And you need to type in your email address that you're using. For me, this is simply Greg@FourthBrain. And as you go through this, it looks like this default location is fine. So enter the file. We can go ahead and that looks good. We're going to overwrite because I've already done this before. Yes. And enter a passphrase. I really don't need a passphrase. Same passphrase is empty. And you'll see this great, the key fingerprint is this. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. The key's random art image is this, which is pretty cool. And so now it's saved into this location. And on Mac, what we want to do is we want to copy our key so that we can share it with GitHub. This copies it, and then if we go to GitHub, we want to make sure we're logged in under the appropriate account. And I'll just sort of move myself over here. And if we go to settings, and on settings on the left hand side you'll see SSH and GPG keys. This is our SSH key. I want to click new SSH key, and we can go ahead and call this MLOps dev SSH, and I'm simply going to paste in the SSH key, and you'll notice it has SSH-RSA. This is what we sort of show here as we're going to SSH and GPG. Click on new, add, and begins with SSH-RSA. There we go, add key. There we are. We're going to go ahead and be able to leverage this now. Okay, so now we can view repos, we can create new repos, we can clone repos. So the first thing I'm going to do is the same thing that I did during the event, which was to create a new repo and to upload our Jupyter Notebook to that repo. All right, so let's see how this works. If I go to Profile, Repositories, I'm going to click New, and repository name, let's call it Beyond Jupyter. Public is good, add a README, git ignore, I'm going to ignore everything that's not Python, and MIT license is solid choice. This is the same information that we've outlined here for you. All right. Create repo. Now, the repo is now up in the cloud, and what we want to do is we want to bring it back down to earth so we can put our new file, which is going to be, let's call it MLOps dev test notebook. You see that it's in Greg right now. I'm going to save that. Now we want to get that test notebook up into the cloud, but first what we need to do is we need to make sure that we can work from that repo while we're down in our local environment. So the way to do this is we can go back to our GitHub portion, and we want to essentially add content to our repo. All right, and this isn't exactly what this tutorial is doing, but it's going to allow us to make sure that we are doing the core steps that we need. And the first step is to clone the repo, and then it's to add our local content to the repo. Okay. So first, we're going to go back to our terminal. Clear this. And we're going to change directory where we would like to make a directory to hold all of our files. So if we look in Finder and hold down Option, or I'm sorry, yeah, if we hold down Option and we go to our base Macintosh, we can go to Users and we can go to Greg, and we'll see this is where our test notebook is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply create a folder in Greg, and I'm going to call it MLOps work. And now Greg is my sort of home folder. So that's what is indicated here with the tilde, is home. So if you look at what's in the home folder, you can actually see that MLOps work that we just created is there. What we want to do next is we want to change directory into MLOps work, and then following our guide here, we want to make a new directory, and we're going to call it code. So now we have a directory called code within MLOps work. I'm going to cd into code. And then in code, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clone our repo that we just created here. So you can simply take this URL and clone it. And now we've got our repo cloned. If we look inside of MLOps work, we've got code and we've got Beyond Jupyter. That's our repo. We've got it cloned, ready to go with the README and with our MIT license. So as I showed in the demo, what we can do is we can simply move this manually into Beyond Jupyter. And now locally, I have my file, but I haven't yet put it back up to GitHub. And this is the very, very basics of GitHub. All right. Now, what do I need to do to get this thing back up to GitHub? Well, you can start to follow this adding the FourthBrain content, whodunit content to your repo, and you can really work from here to kind of do most everything you need to do. You don't need all of these commands, but we want to essentially establish that connection to this repo. So once we're in our code, once we're in our repo, not in the code repo, but actually in our Beyond Jupyter repo, Beyond, it's got to spell Jupyter, right? And make sure that it's got the same name. Once I'm in my Beyond Jupyter repo, now I can make sure that I'm able to fetch and push stuff to and from that repo. Okay, and really all we need to do here is we simply need to add, remember, going all the way back up to the beginning here, there are a few things that we want to be able to know about Git. The first thing is clone, that's what we just did. The second thing is to add, so git add, and what we're going to add is we're going to add our MLOps dev test notebook. Next, we're going to, you can kind of see where this is going. We have commit and we have push, but we're going to go back down to here, and we've added so next comes the commit, and we're going to type a little note to save with our addition, adding a test notebook. And now we can go ahead. There's nothing to merge, but what we can do is we can, if you see origin, this is what we're talking about. We can, finishing up our git here, we can do a git push, because right now, even though we've added and we've committed, we have not yet pushed it back up to the repo, to the remote repo. Okay, so coming back down here, if we simply go to git push origin main, so type in your password. Once we push, then we'll see that now, if we refresh, we can see that our notebook is actually up on GitHub. So that's it for GitHub basics, for local file up to a remote repository. And we will be going into a deeper dive GitHub event very soon. But for now, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and move away from our software for dev for MLOps 101, and we want to figure out how we can leverage our deep learning course 2, course 4, week 2, lab 1. No batch is what we're going to be deploying here, but we're going to be deploying an ML model with FastAPI and Docker. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clone this entire repo. We'll notice that this is the entire repo. It's not just course 2 or course 4, but it's the entire repo. So we're going to clone that down, and you'll notice we can clone the SSH as well, which I don't believe I did in the live event, but we're going to do a deep dive into SSH again in our upcoming GitHub event. So what we can do is we can clear this out. We can go ahead and get rid of this. And so imagine, here we are, we're in our Beyond Jupyter repo. So ideally, let's not be in there unless we want to put everything from the deep learning repo inside of that repo, but rather let's go ahead and cd back up into code. So remember, this is going to be simply where, if we go back to our home, then code Beyond Jupyter is here, but within code it's going to bring my deep learning repo in. So chain access error code on macOS, all you need to do is, so you'll see it's building out this repo now. Once we've got it, then what we can do is we can go course 2, week again, course 4, week 2, and our FastAPI and Docker lab, and no batch is where we want to be. So I'll go ahead and hold Option here, and I'm going to copy no batch as a path name so that I can, in Visual Studio, I'm going to open the folder, and well, actually I'll simply navigate to the folder, course 4, week 2, FastAPI, no batch. And this is what's really nice about VS Code, is now all of a sudden I don't really need to worry about this error code here. All of a sudden I can see all the files of different types, and I can even see the Docker file. And since I have Docker installed already, that shows up very nicely. But here I am in VS Code. If I go to no batch, then I can sort of build out each of these files, or what I can do is I can simply look at the main.py file. And if we sort of decrease the font size on this a little bit, you'll see that it goes through the initial package installation. And so one of the things that we want to make sure is that we have all of these packages. So what's really nice here is that all of a sudden we can start really using everything at once. So here we are in our no batch folder. We're already there because we opened it in VS Code. We're in our Conda environment, which is our default recommended environment. And we can make sure that we have packages like pickle. Or if pip doesn't work, we want to try brew for Mac. And so it looks like we already have pickle ready to rock and roll. How about NumPy? We already installed that. How about FastAPI? Now this is what I had mentioned during the event, is that FastAPI right now is going to be hard to figure out how to install. Again, I need to, for whatever reason, type in this password. It looks like there is no FastAPI within Brew. So instead, you can always look at the list of what Brew packages you have. You can always look at the list of what pip packages you have. Now either way is fine, as long as you're in that Conda environment. But what I noticed when I was putting this together is we actually have to pip install FastAPI. And that works just fine. We want to make sure that we have Pydantic. We'll try Brew on Pydantic. Again, Brew doesn't work here. And I always allow here, so we stop getting interrupted. So again, that's a pip install Pydantic. And this is what's really nice about aligning our Unix operating systems, is that we can all use pip for many, many things. So Brew is sort of optional throughout this whole thing. All right. So once we have this ready to roll, then we should have everything we need. It looks like, this code just lines up one-to-one. This code further lines up one-to-one, and on and on. And then Dockerizing the server. Now, one of the things that I did is I simply ran it not Dockerized as well as Dockerized during the event. And one of the things that you'll notice is that if you try to run this as is, so if you get to the bottom here, it'll tell you that the way to run this app is to call uvicorn main app, and you need to be in the same directory as the main.py file. So that means you need to be within app. Now what's interesting here is if I run this, well, a couple problems will come up. I'm not going to see that I have uvicorn yet, so I need to make sure that I go ahead and install uvicorn. Beyond that, if I try to run this, it's going to fail. Now, why is it going to fail? What is it pointing to? Well, it's pointing to so it seems to be running, starting the server, but we're running into an issue when we get to app wine pickle. So this is essentially the wine data in a pickle file here. This is the data. However, if I'm in app, I don't need to specify that I'm in app. I really only need to call the file. So if I save this exit out here, clear, and I'm going to rerun. Now I get another error, and the next error is no module sklearn. So make sure I have sklearn, play the package game here, and clear it out again. And now we see that we are in business. So if I go ahead and open up this URL, congratulations, your API is working as expected. And the way to work with FastAPI is to go to /docs, and it opens up this great little user interface as we saw. And you can try out our prediction. And the way to do this is to take one of the wine examples here, copy and paste it. And this is the wine class 0. And if we execute, we'll see that we are predicting wine class 0. So the FastAPI app can work without Docker, but we have to be within the app folder, and we have to modify that pickle file path name. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and close this. And the last thing is to just show, I'm going to close this out. The last thing, I'm going to put app back here, save that. I'm going to CD up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, the best way to do this on Mac was to go ahead and install Docker Hub. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Or I'm sorry, Docker Desktop, not Docker Hub. And we want to install Mac with Apple Chip. So Docker takes a little while, and this is, you know, part of the joys of development. So now that we are back in no batch, we'll go ahead and open this when it's ready. What we can see is that we've got our Dockerized, so we can drag and drop Docker into applications. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just do that real quick. How nice is that? Docker Desktop is pretty big. That's true. And you know, for the M1, again, this was the easiest way to get this done. I was having some problems using the command line for Docker. But I also think Docker Desktop just gives a very nice GUI-based feel for how the containers are working. And then once we have Docker Desktop going, we can use our spotlight here. We can actually open it up. I don't really need to learn more, but Docker Desktop is starting up. And once we have Docker ready to rock, we can make sure that we're good to go. Now this is obviously from the last event. We want to make sure we're getting rid of everything here. And so we're all cleared out. All right. So the Docker file and creation of the Docker file is sort of outlined here. I'm not going to go into the Docker file details, but it is worth noting that we are exposing port 80. And you'll see you're sort of calling the same thing that we did before, which is that UVcorn main app. And then that app.main, that's simply just telling you that you need to go to the app folder here, and then you need to go to main.py to call this app. And we're calling it on the local host. So this is all being deployed locally. So this is our Docker file. You can view it here. It's the same thing. And in order to build the Docker file, build the Docker image, we can go ahead and just call this directly from the command line within our no batch folder. And since I've already done this, it doesn't take very long, but it will take about 70 seconds or so for you. And then running the container is actually easier, in my opinion, and easier on the M1, at least it was for me as I was prepping this. If you go to the images, you can see the Docker image is now there. And what we want to do is we want to click run. So that seems a bit easier to me. And we're on port 80. So we're going to type that in. Once this is running, we can actually click into it, and we can see the same output that we were looking for in the command line when we were just running FastAPI. So if we click, here we are again. Congratulations, your API is working as expected. We can go to docs. We can go predict our wine class. We can try it out. Let's try class 1. We execute. We are predicting class 1. So there you have it. There's the long form. Now, what we would need to do if we wanted to not simply work on this locally, but we wanted to push this back up to our own GitHub, is we would need to go through some additional GitHub pieces to make sure that we had a repo ready to push back up to. We could create the same named repo that Deep Learning has and push everything back up, but it would probably be nicer to just push up the things that we were using. That's a little bit more involved, and we're going to go, again, deeper into some GitHub basics during our next upcoming event to show a little bit about branch development and a little bit about pull requests as well. So we're also going to take this app with FastAPI and Docker, and we're going to modify it so that we're not just doing a wine classification app, but instead we're doing a really cool state-of-the-art diffusion model app through FastAPI directly. So if you're used to using these diffusion model apps through Hugging Face or through other APIs, now you can build your own with this upcoming event, just like this, through FastAPI. So we're looking forward to that, and the video should be coming out soon, within the next few weeks, and we hope to see you there. Let us know if you have questions. Please leave them in the chat, in the comments, and please like and subscribe to FourthBrain, and let us know what other content you'd love to see from us in the future. Thanks so much. Hope you found this useful. See you soon.